Remember all the talk about The Flash being amazing and awesome? Fans and so-called critics who were shown the movie early couldn't stop raving about how awesome it was. Even new DC President James Gunn said it was one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. Remember all that hype? Well, it was all bullshit. This movie's a pile of shit. The Flash is one of the worst superhero movies of all time. It might be one of the worst movies ever made. It makes Morbius look like the Dark Knight. The studio should have been paying me to watch this fucking thing. The plot is the same as any other time travel movie. Barry Allen, aka The Flash, is sad and alone because his mother was killed when he was a kid, and his father went to jail for it, even though he's innocent. He's been trying to appeal his father's sentence, but he's been unable to get him out of jail. In Zack Snyder's Justice League, Barry realized he could use the Speed Force to go back in time a few seconds. And during the opening scene of this movie, Barry realizes that he can go back even further in time. So he decides to go back in time and prevent his mother's murder and his father being arrested for it. Despite Batman warning him it's a terrible idea, he goes back in time anyway and does it. And he immediately causes chaos with the multiverse that Barry's now got to undo, while learning that some fates can't be changed. This movie has some of the worst special effects I've ever seen in a movie. The CGI for so many scenes is obviously unfinished. You remember The Mummy Returns at the end when the Scorpion King comes out of the tunnel to fight Brendan Fraser and he looks awful? Well, this is even worse than that shit. The studio spent hundreds of million dollars making this and it looks worse than a CW superhero show. Silver scene in X-Men Days of Future Past. The special effects for The Flash running can't even compare to that. And that's even though Days of Future Past was 9 years ago. When Barry goes back in time, he meets a younger version of himself. So the majority of the movie has two Barry Allens working together. But they clearly didn't even bother having Ezra Miller film as both characters. There are several scenes in the movie with them together and one of them's unfinished CGI. Oh, and remember all those hyped up multiverse cameos? They all looked abysmal. For the actors that are no longer alive like Christopher Reeve, I can kind of understand. But you've got a living, breathing Nicolas Cage and yet for some reason they still CGI'd him as Superman? Why bother making something that awful looking when they could have just had Nick Cage film the scene the way he looks now? It probably would have cost less than this half-ass CGI. Henry Cavill filmed scenes for this, but for some reason they cut him out of the movie and instead left in a shitty CGI likeness of him for Barry to look at as he travels the Speed Force. Movies about the multiverse are just an excuse for studios to bring back dead characters or actors from discontinued franchises to get cheap nostalgia points. And The Flash couldn't even get that part right. Let's get to the performances. None of them are good. Ezra Miller isn't a good actor and he can't carry a movie. Even with the main Barry Allen being a much more serious character, Ezra's too fucking annoying to be the main character of anything. Things get even worse when Barry travels through time and meets the younger version of himself who's even more obnoxious. He just isn't good as a lead actor who needs to carry dramatic scenes. Ezra's performance worked in Zack Snyder's Justice League because he was a part of an ensemble. His shtick worked when he was the sixth most important character in the movie, and Ben Affleck and the rest of the cast did the heavy lifting. Michael Keaton returns as Batman and he completely phones it in. Even then, he's still better than everyone else in the movie, because the rest of the movie is just that bad. For me, the main draw of this was seeing Michael Keaton playing Batman again after 30 years. Him coming back, you think the filmmakers would have an epic story in mind for his return. Nope. When you first meet him, he's supposed to be this broken down, tragic character. But the movie never tells you why. In fact, it sounds like his mission as Batman was a success. He mentions to Barry that Gotham is one of the safest cities in the world. But he immediately tells the Barrys he wants nothing to do with their mission. You know, their mission to save Bruce's own world. Why? You never get a reason. Then he just changes his mind because the story needs to keep moving. Keaton's fight scenes are terrible. They could have showed him as an older, savvier Batman who uses his smarts to defeat his opponents. But instead they use a mix of CGI and a stuntman for all his fight scenes and have him moving around like he's 25 years old instead of a 71-year-old. Christian Bale played an old man version of Batman better in The Dark Knight Rises and he was only 38 years old. Maybe there's another version of this movie where Keaton's Bruce Wayne had an actual character arc, but it's not in this film. Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot are in the film, but it's a complete waste of their time. They both deserve better than for this to be their last appearance in the DCEU. Sasha Calle is fine as Supergirl. She doesn't have a big role or much of a character though. When Bruce and the Barrys go to a Siberian prison where they think Clark Kent is being held, instead they find Kara Zor-El, Clark's cousin. She escaped from a family Krypton the same time as baby Clark, but their pods were separated. Bruce and the Barrys can't find Clark, so Kara agrees to help because she knows Zod is bad. Oh, did I forget to mention Zod? Yeah, he's here too. Barry's trip to this alternate universe happens at the exact same time that Zod decides to attack the Earth looking for the Kryptonian living there. Just like in Man of Steel. Zod nearly destroyed the Earth in Man of Steel, and now he's an afterthought. Just someone for these heroes to fight in the third act. Where's Clark Kent during all this? Apparently, someone thought it would be a good idea to put it in the script that, in this world, Zod captured Clark's escaping pod and then killed him. He killed infant Clark Kent. Now I know Warner Brothers wanted to replace Superman with Supergirl at one point while making this, but it's insane to me that they thought the best way to introduce Supergirl was by also revealing that Zod murdered baby Kal-El and having her replace him. If anything, one of the most important takeaways from this movie, which was probably unintentional, is just how important it is to have Superman in the world since Zod kills Supergirl in the final battle. Then he kills her over and over again after the alternate Barry goes back in time over and over again to try and reverse her fate. But it doesn't work. All worlds need Clark Kent to beat Zod. The ending of this film really bothered me. After both Keaton's Batman and Supergirl have been killed multiple times in the final battle, Barry just decides that this world's meant to die and they can't change anything. So he just abandons the Earth so Zod can destroy it. I get that Barry needs to learn that he can't go back in time and stop his mother from dying, because it's a fixed point and altering reality messes with the multiverse. Kind of like how in Across the Spider-Verse mentioned that you can't change canon events or you damage the world. But at least that had Miles acting like a hero and fighting to save lives, while Barry decides to let billions of people die. I think it's ridiculous that Barry decides that he needs to give up and let Zod win. And the movie actually presents it as some kind of wise decision. Real superheroes don't do that. Real superheroes don't do that shit. Even if the odds are impossible, you fight on and save as many lives as you can. That's why the ending of the show Angel is one of the greatest endings of all time. It's the apocalypse and you've got a handful of heroes left alive and they've got a giant army of demons coming for them. The odds are truly insurmountable. But when someone asks Angel what do, he just says, we fight. And that's because that's what heroes do.
And in terms of a plan, we fight. Bit more specific? Let's go to work.
Does Barry think that his Earth Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman would abandon a parallel Earth to be destroyed just because they thought that was meant to happen? If anything, I think previous movies and decades of comic books shown that they would never do that. Plus, there might not be a Superman in this alternate universe, but Barry has a Superman in his universe. Why not have Barry go back to his own world, get his Superman, and bring him to this alternate world so he can defeat Zod and save the planet? They had Henry Cavill on set and filmed scenes with him that were edited out of the movie. Bring him back in and have him break Zod's fucking neck again. The ending's a disgrace. Barry lets that world get destroyed, and then he goes back and undoes what he did to save his mother. But when he goes to his father's appeal at the end of the movie, you find out that he changed reality again so his father's face is seen on a security camera at the convenience store at the same time his mother dies, confirming his alibi and getting him freed. So Barry went back and changed time again. In the final scene, Bruce Wayne shows up at the courthouse to congratulate Barry, and now it's George Clooney instead of Ben Affleck, because Barry altered reality when he got his father freed. He's willing to let another Earth die because he doesn't want to change time, but for his own benefit, he'll go back in time and alter reality. By the end of the movie, Barry literally learned nothing. I hate this movie. It's one of the worst superhero movies of all time. I can't think of anything good to say about this. Bad acting, bad story, bad effects. The only good thing I can say about this movie is after about 2.5 hours, it finally ended. Don't even bother with going to see The Flash.